All right. Uh, Thank you guys for joining us today. My name is Michael Williams, and I'm here with Farrukh. And today we have a very special show for you, as all of them are special. But we're going to be talking about something that's pretty important. Um, there's a noise in the background. Is that coming from my side or yours? Okay. Yeah, it's gone now. It's gone. All right. So we're going to be talking about something that's not only important in terms of or in reference to your speech, but it's also important to anytime you desire to uh, develop a new habit or achieve a goal or whatever. So I'm going to actually turn this over to Farrukh. If you have questions or comments, please go ahead and post them, and we will respond as we are able. Okay, so go ahead, Farrukh, and introduce us to the topic for today.
Yes, sure. So I hope you guys are doing very good, and it's great to be here once again. And as Mr. Michael said, we are going to be focusing on focus. So that is really going to be an amazing thing. And we all know that this is the most important thing, not only when you're working on your speech, whatever you're working on, and whatever you want to get, whatever you want to really achieve, the main thing and the main point is your focus, like where you are focusing on, where you are focusing at. And you would see that what happens is that whatever you are focusing on, life gives you more and more situations of what you are focusing on. If you focus on being happy, healthy, life would give you more situations to be happy and healthy. If you focus on being very, very angry, if you keep focusing on being nervous, being anxious, then life would give you more of that. So we really think and believe that we have to do things, but what we really have in our hands is where we are focusing at, where we are focusing on. If we are focusing on the right thing, then we can get all of what we want. But if we start focusing on the negative things, then it really starts to get us down and it is not very helpful. So it's in our hands. So, as something is in our hands, we have to really make sure that we use it in the right way, as it is really something that can really help us and that can really transform our lives. So, speaking about focus, what happens is that out of our habits, our mind has a habit of focusing on the negative things, focusing on what is not good, focusing on we don't want this, focusing on what you don't want. All of these things are because of your habits. You keep focusing on the negative, you keep focusing on things which really make you down, which really make you sad, which really get you down, and which are not very helpful. And why do we focus on all of those things? The main reason is because we have trained our mind. We have not trained our mind. Maybe all of the experiences that we have had, whatever we have experienced, and everything has really just contributed towards that. And it is making us focus on the wrong things. What we have to do is that we have to replace what we are focusing on. We cannot stop focusing on the negative. We cannot stop focusing on what we don't want. But what we can really do is that we can focus on what we want. We can focus on some things that would make us move forward. We can focus on the things that would make us go ahead, that would make us go forward. And the more we focus on those things, our mind would not be able to focus on the negative things. Our mind won't be able to focus on those things that are not helpful. But don't get me wrong, because of your habits, your mind would keep trying to get you back towards focusing on the negative. it is something that you really have to work pretty hard at. You would just keep trying to focusing on the right things, and your mind would keep bringing you back. Then you would focus on the right thing, your mind would keep bringing you back. So you have to just keep doing this for a while. You don't have to give up, because your mind wants you to give up. And why your mind wants you to give up? Because it is easier for the mind to focus on what it has been focusing on for a whole lot of years. So it's quite easy for the mind to focus on that. So you are really fighting your mind, you are really fighting your brain, and you have to keep doing that over and over again until that becomes a habit. You have to keep doing that until that starts to happen automatically, and your mind starts to develop it as a habit. Now it's easy for the mind to focus on what you want, and it has almost forgot focusing on the negative things, focusing on what you don't want and stuff like that. So as this webinar moves on, we would be speaking more about this focus thing, and especially focus with respect to your speech, your mindset related to your speech, and all of those things. So yeah.
Very good. Very okay. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Yes. Okay. So give us an example or two of how focusing on what you want can be extremely helpful. For example, some people struggle with anticipation or negative anticipation, worrying about their speech. And they could be worrying about an entire speaking situation, uh, like a meeting that they have, a call, a Zoom call, um, going to get coffee, introducing themselves or whatever, right? So that's a specific situation. Or they could be anticipating or worrying about a word. So they're speaking and all of a sudden they scan ahead and they say, "Uh-oh, I'm gonna have I'm gonna have to say this word. I'm gonna have problems." So how can shifting their focus help? Like, how does that work in a specific situation, like a micro situation in terms of speech? And how does it help in terms of negatively anticipating an entire speaking situation?
Hmm. Excellent question. Excellent. uh okay, so as we are speaking about focus, now relating focus with speech and speaking, like as Mr. Michael said, we have developed habits of focusing on the wrong things. Like whenever we are going into a speaking situation, we are focusing on the fact that we hope we don't get stuck. So we are focusing on what we don't want for ourselves. The point of this is that if you keep focusing on, I hope I don't get stuck, I hope I don't do this, I hope this does not happen. So you're not doing it pretty much consciously, but what you are doing is that you're focusing more on that. If you're just constantly repeating to yourself that I don't want to get stuck, that I don't want to get stuck, what your mind is doing is that it is constantly hearing get stuck, get stuck, get stuck. And the more it is into that mode, the more you would get stuck. So when you are really worrying about speaking situations, when you're really worrying about, I hope I don't get stuck, so you really think that you are solving the problem, but it's actually what is really creating the problem. That is a very, very important point. When you're focusing on, I hope I don't get stuck, you focus on that because you think that it's going to help you. But it is the main thing that is really just that is really just creating all of the problems. That is something which is very important and that you have to realize. Okay, so if you don't have to focus on, I hope I don't get stuck, then you might be wondering that what I need to focus on. You need to shift this focus. You need to replace this focus. As I said, it's often hard to stop focusing on something, but it's really easy to replace that focus or to shift that focus on towards something else. Because it would be very hard if you just constantly repeat that I don't have to focus on this. You might just end up focusing more on that. But if you replace that focus towards something else, that is what would be very helpful. Now, what is that something else? You can shift your focus towards speaking smoothly. Instead of going into a speaking situation worrying, I hope I don't get stuck, why not to shift your focus towards, in this speaking situation, I want to speak smooth. In this speaking situation, I want to use my new speaking style. I want to speak smoothly. I want to speak in a manner that would really influence someone whom I'm speaking to. I have to say something that would be of value, that would have a great, great impact. Once you start focusing on that, your mind would not have the space to focus on the negative things. Your mind wouldn't really have the space to focus on, uh, I hope I don't get stuck on this word. I hope this word would not really sort of bother me. Or I hope I don't just keep struggling with my speech. I hope I am not made fun of. If you shift your focus from these thoughts and onto the thoughts that I just mentioned, your mind would start focusing on that. And guess what? Focusing more on speaking smoothly, focusing on being relaxed and calm, focusing on, I hope I can have a great impact on the person whom I'm speaking to. I hope I can add great value. Once you start focusing on that, these the rest of these thoughts just take care of themselves. But as I said, your mind wants you to focus on the negative things because of the habits. It's not very, very easy that I'm saying that you have to focus on this and you would start focusing on that, and all of the problems would be solved. No, once you would start focusing on that, your mind would say, no, you have to focus on, I hope I don't get stuck. You have to focus on those words. And it is sort of, I can say, very hard at the start to shift your focus really towards the right things, because our minds have been trained to really uh, focus on something. Our minds are really trained because of what we have been doing and what we have been focusing on for years. They want you to stay in that comfort zone. It's basically an uncomfortable comfort zone, but it's still a comfort zone for the mind. So your mind wants you to really stick on to that. You have to keep shifting your focus, keep shifting your focus. After you keep doing that over and over again, over and over again, over and over again, one time your mind would is going to say that, okay, now I know what to focus on. It would start focusing on that, and the more you keep doing that, now it would develop that as a habit. Now focusing on these things would develop as a habit, and focusing on the wrong things or the negative things, it's not going to happen much. So this is how it actually goes. Yeah.
Very good. Very. So I'm gonna. This is a perfect segue into uh, the 80/20 rule as it refers to speech, and then I'm going to give you a very very specific example from a client who I just met with yesterday, I believe. And so he said, as with many of our clients and students, that he had been struggling with negative thoughts, anticipating, worrying about his speech, constantly thinking about, and in a sense, knowing that I'm going to get stuck on this word, I'm going to struggle, and so forth. So, in our first meeting last week, I said, okay, here's what I'd like for you to do. And so I'm going to share with you one specific technique, proactive speaking technique from the Pro 90D smooth speech system. And so we call this extending your words, extending and blending. It's just two techniques, actually. Um, Very common. You might call it elongating or stretching. We call it extending, right? It's a very, very powerful tool. And it's only one. Um, Modeling is huge in Pro 90. It's very, very powerful. Athletes do it, musicians do it, you do it, whether you know it or not. So modeling is another powerful tool for shifting your focus. But for right now, we're going to zoom in on a specific technique or tool. Okay. And so we said, here's what I'd like for you to do. Every time you speak, now notice I said every time. Now, let's go back to what Farrukh said. You have to do this over and over again because you have to create now a new habit, a new thought pattern, right? A new habit of thinking about something that you maybe didn't think about before. So I said, every time you speak, I want you to focus at least 80% of your attention on extending and blending your words. So I gave him basically one thing to think about every time he spoke and the whole time that he's speaking. Now, here's where the challenge comes in. Many of you will say, well, when I'm speaking, I have to think about the topic. I have to think about what I'm talking about. When I'm talking to someone, I have to think about that. Or if I'm in a meeting, I have to think about the questions that are being asked of me, or think about what the person is saying. So I don't have the mental capacity to be thinking about how I'm speaking or extending or whatever. Well, that's absolutely not true. You actually do have the capacity. And remember, this is temporary. So you won't always have to think about, for example, extending and blending or think about how you're speaking. But if you don't put the majority of your attention, that is, if you don't focus the majority of your attention every time you speak and the whole time you're speaking on how you're speaking, but in a positive way, like extending and blending, if you don't do that and you focus on the content or how you're going to respond, then what will your brain do about your speaking style? Like, how will you speak? Well, you'll automatically revert back to the way you normally speak. Why? Because you're not able to change it because you're not thinking about it, right? If you're not thinking about how you're speaking, then your brain has already automated it for decades. So you will automatically speak the way you usually speak. Okay. So the only way to change the way you're speaking is when you're speaking and while you're speaking, you have to consciously shift your focus, like while you're speaking. Well, how do we do this? 80% or more of your attention has to be on, for example, extending, blending your words. So, what my client said is that when he was speaking in his conversations and his meetings, he put 80% or more of his attention on extending and blending his words, and he instantly and immediately began to speak smoother. And guess what? He was also able to say everything he wanted to say. So that's the magic of focus is that you can focus 80% or more on how you're speaking, and you have enough brain capacity to say everything you want to say. So don't let your mind trick you into thinking you can't think about how you're speaking right now. You just don't have time. You don't have to speak. You do have the time. You must have the time. And you can also say what you want to say. I can guarantee you, if you don't do this, you will not be able to change your speaking style. You'll continue to, in certain situations, you'll continue to speak the way that you used to speak. What do you think about that, Farouk?
Yes, some excellent points, Mr. Michael, that you just made. So, as I mentioned, that you have to keep focusing on speaking smoothly. Now, how do you speak smoothly? And this is where modeling comes in. This is where all the speaking skills come in. And extending and blending are just some of the skills that Mr. Michael mentioned. And in this Pro 90D system, we have a whole lot of skills for you to focus on. So, as he said, what happens is that when you say that I have to focus on, let's say, extending and blending, and your mind starts to say that I have to also focus on what I have to say. So how can I focus on extending and blending? But what you might also realize that while you're speaking, you're still focusing on, I hope I don't get stuck. So you are still focusing on something which is not what you have to say. You're focusing on, I hope I don't get stuck. So why not to shift that focus on towards these speaking skills? Why not to shift that focus on towards modeling? As you keep shifting your focus on towards these things, you see that you start to speak smoothly. You see that you start speaking in the right way. And for that, you also really have to know that what you have to focus on when you are working on your speech. And in the self-study course, there is modeling, there are a whole lot of speaking skills, and a whole lot of stuff. But if you're working one on one with Mr. Michael, what happens is that you really know what you have to focus on. Like he would really see you and he would say that you have to focus on this speaking skill right now. So let's say it's slowing down. Let's say for someone, it might be extending. For someone, it might be extending and blending. For someone, it might be inflecting. So you know what you have to focus on. And you can also just figure that out on your own, but it might really take you a bit longer. If you're working with someone one on one who has had a long experience of helping a whole lot of people, he really knows what you need to focus on. So he would let you know that you focus on this, keep focusing on that. And guess what? You have to shift, as Mr. Michael said, 80, almost 80% of your focus on towards that mindset, on towards those speaking skills. And as I said, once you start focusing on that, your brain, it would be very hard for your brain and your mind to focus on uh, the words, the all the stuff that you think that you might get stuck on. If you shift your focus on towards these things, your mind wouldn't be focusing on those things. But as we said, this is something which is not very easy, and you have to keep repeating it. You have to keep repeating it. After you would use it, you would see that you are having some great successes. But after a while, whenever you experience a failure, let's say, that we are going to speak about, you're going to feel like, oh, it's not working, it's not for me, maybe I should not focus on this, I should not work on this. So what it would do is that it would bring you back towards your old speaking style. But you have to accept that this is going to happen. You're not doing something which is very easy. You're actually changing the structure of your brain, which does take time, which has to take time. And if there is something in your life where you have to work very hard at until you see the results, you value it more, because you had to really work so hard to get the results. You had to work very hard to just get what you want. So after a while, after some time, or the more time that you have to really put into it to get the results, to see the results, the more you would value it. So yes, this is basically how it works.
So one point that you made that I want to highlight is some people say, well, it's hard and I can't do it. And we say, okay, when you're speaking 80% or more of your time, think about this. Well, I can't do that. Well, like Farrukh says, in many cases, that's exactly what you're doing, but you happen to be focusing on something that's destructive and negative. And we know this, and you know this because how many times have you been speaking and you constantly are kind of injecting negative thoughts into your mind about, I hope I don't get stuck. Or you might say, I hope I don't stutter. I hope I don't block. I hope I don't stutter on this word. I hope I don't make a fool out of myself. Or I know I'm going to get stuck on this word. You're doing it right there. You're focusing while you're speaking or while the other person's speaking or during the meeting, during your conversation, your brain is shifting back and forth. It's shifting its attention on something that's negative and that's destructive. So you already know how to do it. You're already doing it. You're just probably doing it in a way that's not helping you. And what we're saying is take the same skill and ability that you already have, that you're already using, take that ability and shift it so that now instead of focusing on what you don't want to happen, what you hope doesn't happen, even if you're saying, okay, I want to start, I want to make sure that I don't get to, you shift it to extend and blend your words. Make sure that you breathe, relax. How would your model speak? How would your model speak right now? How would your model act right now? How would your model feel right now? Speak like your model. Okay. That is going to help you, even if in that moment it doesn't help you as much as you would like. It's going to help you way more, exponentially more than thinking about the negative. Even if it only helps you a little. But trust me, even if it helps you a little bit in that moment, if you continue to think it moment after moment after moment, day after day, it becomes a habit, and you'll see that you start to get traction and your speech starts to improve and you actually start speaking smoother and you develop a habit initially of thinking about the way you want to speak. Now, we're not saying that you have to and that you should think about how you're speaking in a positive way forever. It's only until your brain takes it and turns it into a habit. Then you don't have to think about how you're speaking. Farouk and myself and many other people, we're not thinking about extending or any proactive speaking skills. We're probably not even thinking about modeling because it's all habit now, right? So once you do it, and this is, excuse me, this all comes down to brain science. And this isn't just our opinion, something that we're just coming up with to make you feel good. This is not just positive thinking. This is brain science. Your brain wants to turn repeated behaviors, be they thoughts, if you repeat the same thinking over and over again, or you repeat the same actions, it wants to turn those into habits because when you have to consciously think about something, your brain uses a lot of energy, right? It consumes more energy than normal. That's why you feel exhausted when you have to take a test or when you have to study or when you have to do something that requires more cognitive effort, especially from your frontal cortex, your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, the one that has to make decisions. The more you have to use this part of your brain to think about something, the more effort it requires, the more energy it requires, the more tired you feel because you're literally using more energy, right? Physical energy. Your brain doesn't want to do that and wants to turn as much as it can into habits, like speaking. So the more you think about how you want to speak, the sooner your brain can take that new behavior and make it a habit. So what you'll see is if you focus 80% or more of your conscious attention on how you're speaking, for example, modeling, extending and blending, breathing, then your brain takes that. So if you do it every single time you're speaking, the whole time you're speaking, you try to do it. If you try to do it, you will do it more and more. Then your brain says, great, this is what we want to do. Let's turn this thinking and this behavior into a habit so we don't have to use as much energy. So you keep doing it, and lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, 3 weeks later, the 80% now starting to drop down to 70, to 60, to 50, to 40, to 30. And now you don't have to. And it could take a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever. It doesn't matter. The more you focus on it, I would say from my decade of working with people, what I've seen on average is if somebody's out there and they're speaking every day and they're applying what they've learned, within about 6 months, which sounds like a long time, but it's not, it goes by really, really fast. Within 6 months, it's pretty much a habit. You don't have to think about it. It starts to become a habit usually in about 3 weeks, right? It starts, but it's not really a habit till about 4 months, 5, 6 months, sometimes a little longer. But once it's a habit, you're no longer thinking about it. Right now, you can shift your thoughts to other stuff. Yeah.
Excellent points. Yeah, great points. The next thing that I would like to mention right here, Mr. Michael, is that with respect to the focus, what we are also used to focusing on, like if let's say you start working on your speech with this Pro 90-day speech system, and you start to really work very hard with your speech, you are going to see that within a week or so, you're going to start to see the results. As Mr. Michael said, it would start to become a habit. It wouldn't become a habit, but it would start. The more you keep doing that, the more of a habit it becomes. But the point I was trying to mention is that after you see that you're speaking well, your mind still wouldn't want you to focus on the successes. This is also a very important point. You would see that, let's say you start working on your speech, you go out, you enter a speaking situation, and you speak very well for, let's say, half of the conversation. You wouldn't actually focus on that, or your mind wouldn't want you to focus on that. It would still want you to focus on the rest of the conversation where you were not able to speak well. This has happened with me, this has happened with a whole lot of students, that even if we had a great conversation, but let's say if there was just one word where it wasn't good, or we maybe struggled on that word, it might be our name or something like that, your mind, your brain would like to focus on that. It would say that, okay, you spoke well for the rest of the conversation, but what about this word? What about this phrase? What about this time where you did not speak well? And guess what? As I said, if you keep focusing on the unsuccessful speaking experiences more, you're going to get more of that. But rather, if you shift your focus towards, you see that when I started working, let's say I wasn't speaking good at all. There wasn't even one phrase that I was able to say smoothly. Now I can have most of, and not even if most of, maybe half of my conversations go pretty smooth. So if you see it like that, it is a success. You might still believe, or you might still think that my whole conversation should go well, but you have to understand that it would really take time. You have to keep doing that over and over again. But in this process, you need to constantly focus on your successes. You need to constantly focus on the fact that you are doing good. You need to constantly focus on the fact that you are speaking smoothly. And guess what? The more you focus on that, the more your mind starts to believe that, yes, I can speak smoothly. Yes, I can speak well. And the more your mind would start to really believe that I can speak smoothly, it would make you want to go out more. It would make you want to speak more. And the more you speak, the more smooth you speak, the more speaking successes you have to remember, and the more speaking successes you have to remember, the more you want to go out. So it basically becomes quite a positive loop. We all have been stuck into a negative loop. We have to shift it with this positive loop. And once we get into this positive loop and we make it a habit, it is also very hard to really get out of this. So that's great if you get yourself into this loop. The more you go out, the more successes you experience, the more you feel good. The more you feel good about yourself and about your speech, the more you want to go out, the more you want to speak, and the more speaking successes you have. And the more times you do that, the easier your brain and your mind would get this into your habit portion, and the easier it would become.
Yeah. Very good point. Again, I was talking with a client yesterday. He's a lawyer, he's an attorney. And one of the things that has been helping him is changing his expectations and his mindset, right? About about when he gets stuck. So in fact, not just him, but I have another client who's from the UK, and we were talking about the same thing as well. In fact, I probably talk about this with all of my clients. So that's why Pro 90D is so beneficial because it's holistic. We don't just focus on how you physically speak, but we also focus on your mindset, how you think. And so by reminding yourself and celebrating and focusing on your wins, your successes, no matter how small they are, how incremental they are, you feel more encouraged. You actually start to get traction, right? That moves you forward as opposed to getting discouraged, not getting any traction, and sliding backwards. So by focusing on the fact that you are getting better, even if it's a little bit, even if it's part of your conversation has gotten better as a result of your efforts, when you focus on that, you become more enthusiastic, more excited, and your brain uh, remembers, right? It creates a memory of that little success that you can now go back and rely upon or look at and say, wow, I was able to speak a little smoother in that conversation. So if I keep working on this, I can probably speak a little more smoother or a little more smoothly. So it's very important to focus on your successes. And we talk a lot about like giving yourself a break, not beating yourself up, focusing on your successes, looking at disfluencies as a bump in the road. One of my clients recently said, and then I had a client who told me this a year or two ago, that he has a colleague who speaks worse than him, but his identity is such that he doesn't see himself as a stutterer. So his disfluencies don't bother him. And so in other situations, he speaks very well, right? And so if you focus on your disfluencies and you identify yourself with and as your disfluency, then you'll get more of that. And excuse me, not only that, you'll filter out any successes that you might have. So you won't even notice that you had successes because you're busy focusing on all the disfluencies that you had. And I'm still getting stuck. And oh, look there, I just got stuck. So what? Focus on your successes. So the important thing is to get traction, and you get traction by engaging with and in a system, a scientifically based system, systematic process for changing not only your speech, but your mindset, your thinking, and your identity. That's what Pro 90 does. If you get into a system that only does part of that, then you're going to not really get traction because you might be using this technique or that technique, then your mindset keeps coming back and saying, oh, no, this is not working and you're still messing up. Or your identity says, no, I'm still a stutterer. I still, this is just the way I speak. So they keep pulling you back. So you need a systematic process that you can dig into that gives you traction that you can feel confident about and say, okay, tens of thousands of other people have done this, if not more. I know this works. There's science behind it. Doctors and engineers and scientists have taken the system. Why? Because it's scientifically based. I know it's going to work. I just have to stick with it and I have to focus on my successes. Because Farrukh could tell you if you get into any system, any program, and you don't do the whole thing. You only pick and choose. Well, I don't want to do the modeling. It's too difficult. I'll just listen to the audios. I'll just watch the videos. I'll just use this technique. You got to do the whole thing. It's a system. It's like a formula. You do the whole thing. You do it consistently. And a part of doing the whole thing is focusing on your successes. Then you will see success. You will start to get traction. And based on that, you'll also start to develop new habits, new thinking patterns, new speaking patterns, and all of that will propel you forward. right? So, yeah, that's this idea of focus is what I call critically important. It's important, especially in the moment while you're speaking. If you don't, and it's not something you can just do once, right? It's not something you just, okay, at the beginning of the conversation, I'm going to focus on that. Because a second later, 3 seconds later, your focus will shift back to what it usually focuses on. So 80% of the time, you have to continuously focus on how you want to speak during the entire conversation. Please remember that, because if you don't, this won't work.
Great. Yes. So I just had one more point in my mind as you were speaking of that,
Mhm.
Mr. Michael. And the point is that our mind is trained in a way which is, I would say, very, very natural in a sense that we want all of what we want right now. Like we want each and everything to happen right now. So if we get into the system, many of the times we have unrealistic expectations, like we want to get the results right now. And you'll see that there are many systems out there that would say that we can help you stop stammering in a week, in 1 month. And as our mind wants that, so it might draw itself more towards that oh wow, I can do this in a week, I can do this in a month. You might, but the main thing is that it wouldn't be long lasting. It wouldn't be long lasting, since we mentioned you are changing the structure of your brain, so you have to keep firing those neurons over and over again so that they have to wire together. So if you get something very, 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 very quick, it's not very long lasting. So you have to make sure that you go into the system with realistic expectations, expecting that there are going to be some times where you might fail. There are going to be some times where you might get stuck. But so what? You're still moving ahead. You're still moving forward. It might really take you to turn it into a habit, let's say some months, or let's say an year. But as Mr. Michael says, you have got the rest of your life to speak well and to speak smoothly. So as I was just mentioning, our mind wants everything right now, but that's not how nature works. Things do take time, and good things have to take time. You have to be very patient in the process. You also need to have some courage to go out there and fail. These things are going to happen, but as I was mentioning in some of the meetings, that you might go like this, but you notice that you're still going up. So there might be ups and downs, but the whole trend, the overall trend, is going upwards. So if you have realistic expectations, you just keep doing the daily routine, you just keep focusing on what you need to focus on, you would see that you would get such transformative results.
Yeah, very good, man. So Abdullah um, would like us to just mention the importance of focusing lightly on a skill as opposed to intense focus, and what are the benefits of that. And I believe the question that he's asking is sometimes you can focus too much for too long on something, and it can be detrimental. So there is a point at which you need to kind of back off and actually not focus, right? Not focus. And I'll give you an example. Uh, After you get to a certain level, in fact, I'll give you two examples, right? Two examples. One is this is more of a kind of a physical example in sports, and then one is more of a sociological example in terms of relationships and conversations. So let's talk about the more concrete example. Let's say you have an athlete. Let's do basketball, and this is a pro basketball player and he wants to, or she wants to improve her free throw, right? So, in order to improve his or her free throw skills, they have to bring back into consciousness the mechanics, which means for a period of time, their free throw ability is going to diminish. It's going to get worse, right? Why? Because they're consciously thinking about a behavior that was automatic, and even though maybe it wasn't, in fact, maybe they were terrible at shooting free throws. So they're going to get even worse when they start to think about the mechanics, right? Because they used to just do something automatically that wasn't working, but they did it automatically. It was easy for them. Now they're thinking about, how am I moving my hands? How am I breathing? How am I? Right. So now it gets even worse. But if the mechanics that they're using to to practice to improve their free throw, if the mechanics are solid and they're good, eventually their free throw ability improves. And if they continue to practice over and over, then it becomes automatic. It becomes a habit. So now they've gone from uh, having a poor free throw to getting worse to getting better to becoming automatic, right? To becoming automatically better, where now they're shooting their free throws better and it's automatic and it's not. So it's a process. It's the same exact thing with your speech, that there's a period of time where you do need to intensively focus on the mechanics of speaking. But then there's also a period of time where you don't need to focus on speaking, because it will actually cause you to speak worse because you're thinking too much about the mechanics. So that's a concrete example. It's absolutely true. This is just how it works. Now let's talk about another example. I've found that when you're in a conversation, it's often good, after you've gone through those initial stages of changing, improving the way you speak with the mechanics, it's good to just empty your mind and be present, to literally not think about speaking and not think about the way that you're speaking. And you'll find that when you empty your mind, you're just present, you're tuned into the other person. You're not thinking about speaking, you're not thinking about how you're speaking. Then what happens is you're not scanning ahead, looking for words, thinking about what you're going to say, and then, oh, I can't say that. You're just there, almost empty minded, soaking in what the person is saying, and then allowing yourself to respond naturally and saying whatever you want to say in that moment. You'll find that you actually speak better. I've had so many clients say that they've gone through periods where they didn't think about how they were speaking, because maybe they were with family, they were in an environment where they felt relaxed. They weren't thinking about their speech, but they had been working on it, and they spoke fluently and smoothly. It was natural, it was easy. Then all of a sudden, they became conscious of the fact that they were speaking well, and they started to get stuck more. And that's natural. That can happen. But the point is that there is a period of time where you intensely focus on a skill, then you lightly focus on it, then you don't focus on it at all. So never think that Pro 90D is telling you for the rest of your life you've got to put 80% or any percent of focus on extending or on breathing or on any skill or on modeling, right? There's a period of time where you need to do it, but there's also a period of time where you don't need to do it, where you don't want to do it at all, where it will actually hurt you by thinking about the way that you're speaking. So I hope that addressed your question, Abdullah. Great question. But remember, it's a there are phases. There are phases that you're going through. So the first phase Pro 90D takes you through is, here are the skills, here are the specific things to focus on to immediately begin to improve your speaking style and your mindset, what you're thinking. And the more you do that, every day, every conversation, then the faster you get to that period of time where you lightly do it, you don't have to do it as much, and then you don't have to do it at all because it becomes a habit. So I hope that that answered the question. Yeah. Any other questions from those who are watching, or any other thoughts or comments, Farouk?
Yeah, as you just mentioned, the last point about, let's say, lightly focusing on a skill. So, as we mentioned, that after you just keep focusing on the things which you are required to focus on, and after they become a habit and you no longer have to really focus on them, there might be still sometimes where you might see a word ahead and you might feel like, oh, you might get stuck, but you would know that you have all of the speaking skills with you. You have all of the tools that you have learned from this system that you can use if you see a word ahead, that you can use if you feel like you might get stuck. And what happens is that once you know, like just by knowing that you can use this skill or that skill here or there, your mind would stop worrying about it. Your mind would
Hmm.
stop focusing on it. And once you stop focusing on it, maybe you wouldn't even need to use a skill. Like,
Right,
you know that you can use a skill, but it makes you worry less. It
right,
makes you stop focusing on the fact that you don't want to get stuck, and you might not even have to use a skill or something. You might just say it on its own. So this is what happens. But just knowing the fact that you have the skill set and you have all of that is such a helpful thing. So
right.
yeah.
Those are great points, man. Good way for us to kind of wrap up that you've experienced this yourself as a student, coaching client, and now as a as a coach in training, and you'll soon be coaching yourself. So we want everyone to know that if you see Farouk and you would like to work with him, you work in Urdu and Hindi, right? Those are going to be the languages that you work in, and English, obviously. Um, you can apply to work with him. But the point is that many people who come into the system in the self study, as well as in the private coaching, just by knowing that you're in a system scientifically based, it's been around for more than a decade, it works, you become more confident. And then if we bring this down to the micro level, you know that you have specific tools to help with blocking, to help with a specific word that's coming up that you don't feel like you can say. When you have tools, a toolbox, you actually feel more confident, you feel calmer, even though you might be anticipating. Now, this has happened to me. I may anticipate something. Ooh, I don't feel like that's going to come out, but I'm still calm. I'm still comfortable. And I know that, okay, I can just say it this way. I can do this. So I still say what I want to say smoothly, even though I anticipate it. So the point is that there are times where you still may anticipate, but you'll still be calm and comfortable, and you'll still speak smoothly. You'll still say what you want to say. So that's a very, very important point, which goes to your mindset, right? Your mindset and having the tool set, mindset and tool set, where you're just like, okay, I feel like I might not be able to say this, then I'll just do this or I'll just do that. So you'll hear me say, the more options you have, the more options you give yourself in how you're going to say something, the freer you feel. The freer you feel, the more relaxed, the more confident you feel, and therefore, the more competent that is, the better you're going to perform. So when you when you have options, you feel confident, and often you don't even have to use those options, as Farooq said, because you're now more relaxed. You're not as anxious or worried. Even if you anticipate, you're not as anxious. So then, and I can tell you because I have client after client after client. A client just told me this yesterday. I was speaking, and there were a couple of words where I felt like I was going to get stuck. I was anticipating, but I surprised myself. This is what they say. I surprised myself, right, Farrukh? I surprised myself and I was able to say it, right? And they didn't constantly use a technique, but it's all the work that they had been doing and the fact that they had the tools, they anticipated, but they surprised themselves and they were able. And then the more you surprise yourself over and over and over again, then the more successful speaking experiences you create, the more memories, successful memories you create. And then your brain starts to believe, hey, even if I get stuck, even if I anticipate, I'm still going to be able to handle it, still going to be able to speak smoothly. And that's what changes your speaking identity. Once your identity changes, my identity now is that I can have this fluencies, I can get stuck, but I know I'm an excellent speaker, not the best speaker in the world, but I'm an excellent speaker. I know I can handle just about any speaking situation, whether or not I anticipate, whether or not I have this fluency, I'll still be able to speak smoothly. And so, therefore, any disfluencies I have pretty much don't impact me, right? That's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So, we're going to wrap it up by encouraging those of you who are watching this to, let me just see if I can put a couple of things up here. Let's hide this one and bring this one up here. Actually, I'm going to bring up, yeah, this. Okay. Boom. Fastest, easiest way to improve your speech is to work with us one on one. Yes, you do get the self study. Uh, and yes, this costs more. But anything that you do in life, if you want to get a degree or you want to go through any kind of training, you're going to pay thousands of dollars more than likely. We've had so many people who have come in and in short periods of time, sometimes in weeks, come in, invested in coaching, and as a result of one small change, gotten a job, 10, 15, 20, $30,000 more. Boom. I mean, immediately they've, you know, exponentially gotten returns back on their investment. So you spend a couple thousand, few $1,000s, whatever it is, you can get your investment back, like literally financially, you can get that back because you can get better jobs, you get uh, more promotions, or you can make more sales or whatever. So yes, it costs more, but you're also going to accelerate your progress. It's faster and easier. Why? Evaluation and feedback, encouragement, we help you focus. So the coaching doesn't go in and somehow magically it makes you do the daily routine. Like we can't do that because we can't be with you every day and every moment. You still have to do the work that's in the program. What the coaching does is it saves you time by saying, all right, you don't have to figure out what to focus on because there's a lot of stuff in there. Even though we try to lay it out, if you just do everything, you will improve your speech. Just do it systematically every day. In the self study, you'll improve your speech. But if we want to accelerate that process, then the coaching says focus on this one skill or these two things for this amount of time. And then weeks later, we say, okay, now you got that, focus on this. So it accelerates the time I found by sometimes 10 times. That is 10 times faster you can improve your speech. So we see people working on their own for months and months or years, and their speech is improving. Like I have people write me, oh my God, I saw one of your courses, I did this, my speech has improved, I got a better job. So we're not saying you have to wait for years when you're working on your own, but the same person or someone else will come and work with us and within a shorter period of time make more improvements, right? So that's the coaching. Again, you can work with me, and eventually, in a couple of months, you'll be able to work with Farrukh. Then we have the self-study. Okay, so we'll show you that self-study. Great place to start. Let's just say you don't have the financial means to do the coaching, or you're just not sure yet, or you just want to get started with self-study. Do the self-study. Absolutely do it. Everything you need is there. Uh, you get in, do the entire daily routine. That is, you'll see something called the daily blueprint of activities. Don't skip around and pick things that you want to do because everything's there for a reason. So keep that in mind and do the whole thing and do it consistently. And if you do, you'll get results and relatively quickly. So Farouk, you have any last comments about self study coaching? We invite you guys. We're going to put, you'll see links in or around this where you can access that. But any last words on that?
Yeah, sure. So, as we have discussed, I hope so, and I believe that now you guys know how much important focus is in your speech. So, as Mr. Michael just mentioned about all of the things, it's worth it. Just being able to get into this system, it's worth it. It's going to really transform your life. It's going to transform your finances. It's going to transform your relationships. It's going to help you with your mental health. It's going to help you have more value, more impact, and the list just goes on and on and on. So it's really worth it. It transformed my life. It has transformed a whole lot of lives, and it would transform your life as well. So, as he said, having that self study course is at least where you need to really start with. And it might help you get to where you want, but you might see that you might take a bit longer. Like if you're working on your own, you're figuring it out on your own that I need to focus on this first, this next, it might really take you longer. But if you're working with someone one on one who has had a lot of experience, he can really let you know that this is what you need to focus on. Okay, now you have focused on this, now you need to shift your focus on towards this. Remember, we spoke about the focus thing. And after you keep doing that, as Mr. Michael said, you start to get the same amount of results, but in a very, very short period of time. So that is why this one on one coaching is very helpful. And this is also something which I am also really training to be a speech coach, as Mr. Michael just said. And that is something which I really, really love. And that is something which I feel I can do really well. And if someone wants to work with me as well, I can help you work with both of these languages, like in the language of English as well as in the language of Urdu or Hindi, as we call it. So I hope this webinar found you well, and I hope we have really given you hope that you can transform your speech to the next level, and not only transform your speech, but transform your speech as well as your life to a level where you would never ever have thought it would be possible. But it is with this system. So, yep.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for joining us. Those of you that joined us live, and those of you that are watching this as a replay or listening to this on one of our podcasts, go ahead and check out our YouTube channel. You can type in Pro 90D, How to Stop Stuttering. You'll find our YouTube channel. Subscribe. Uh, you can type in How to Stop Stuttering, How to Improve Your Communication Skills in any of your podcast apps. Subscribe to our podcast. And we're also going to get a link up to Farouk's YouTube channel where he does a lot of the work in Urdu or Hindi, right? So
Yes.
you'll be able to, yeah, so you'll be able to check that out. Okay. Very good then. So we'll see you guys the next time, and we look forward to seeing you either inside the course or working with us one on one. All right.
Thank
So
you.
we'll see.
Hope to see you
Thanks.
guys. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.